In the previous lesson, we created the first part of the Tap the Tiles game. Today we are going to create the second part of this game. I have now finished creating the first part of the game we created in the last lesson. If anyone hasn't watched our 58th lesson, check out the 58th design using the Thunkable.com website now. From here on, we will add parts to the same design and improve it a little more. See, in the previous lesson, we designed the game screen as needed and created a part of the code for it. In addition, some other components for the game screen need to be added in this section. First, let's add those components. Click the plus mark in front of Screen Gaming and we add a new screen. A new screen was added here as Screen 1. We click the rename button in front of Screen 1 in the properties of this screen and rename it as Screen Game Over. Also, the vertical alignment of the screen is given as center. Next, let's add a column to this screen. I drag a column under the layout of Add Components into the screen like this. Let's click the rename button in front of the name of this column and rename it as Column Container. I type here as Column Container, select relative size for the height of the column and type 70 in this box. Select relative size again for width and give 90 here. White color is selected here as the background color of the column and the vertical alignment is given as space around. From the border settings, set the border width as 2 and the radius as 10 and select the black color for the border color. Let's give solid for the border style. Again, let's add a row in the column. As before, I drag a row under the layout of Add Components into the screen like this. Now look at the box showing the components. Column Container is in the Screen Game Over. Again, the row is in it. Let's select this row and rename this as Row Game Over. It is necessary to change the properties of this row in the same way as the properties of the column have been changed. Select relative size for the height of the row and type 60 in this box. Select relative size for width again and give 95 here. From the border settings, set the border width as 2 and the radius as 10 and give solid for the border style. Also click on the box below the border color and type the code related to the color we want here. I type as #EEE. Next, you need to add an image to this row game over. I drag an image under the user interface of Add Components like this. In the box showing components, see if this image has been added to the row. Is it right? Now, select the image and change the properties we want from the properties here. First, I rename this image as Image Game Over. Next, we need to add a picture, so click on the box shown as No Glide Resource below the picture and select the Game Over.png image. Here, the picture resize mode is given as center. Next, let's select relative size for height and give 95 here. In the same way, select relative size for width and give 95. Now, the height of the image is set as 95% of the height of the row and the width as 95% of the width of the row. Let's give the border radius of the image as 5. Next, we need to add a label and a button to the column. First, I add a label. I drag a label under the user interface of Add Component into this column. Look carefully. I drag this label away from the row to a place in the column. Okay. Now a label has been added above the row, but I want to add this label below the row. We can change the location of the component from the box showing these components. First, click on the arrow in front of the row game over and minimize this row. Now, the components in the row are not displayed here. Now let's select label 1 from the box showing components and drag it down the row like this. Okay, now I click the rename button in properties and rename this label as Label Message. Let's type as Label Message here. Remove the text of this label and give it here as You Lost. Next, we need to add another button below this label. In this way, I drag a button under the user interface of Add Components again into the column. This button has also been added above the row, right? Now we know how to add the button below the label. I drag the button from the box showing components down the row like this. Okay, now let's change the name of the button to button retry. Next, this text is removed. The absolute size is given for the height of the button and the value is given as 70. Also, let's give the relative size for the width and give 40 here. White color is given for the background color of the button. Let's add the background picture to this button. I click on the box below the background picture and select retry.png. Let's give the picture resize mode as contain. Finally, in the border settings, the border width of the button is given as 2 and the radius as 5. Let's type the code here as #EEE for the border color. The style is given as solid. Okay, we have now completely designed the game over screen.